Today I'm going to discuss with you Chapter 7, Sections 7.4 and 7.5. This discusses confidence intervals when sigma is not known and must be estimated with S, and also confidence intervals for the variance and the standard deviation. We'll start with confidence intervals, the mean, when sigma is not known. It must be estimated by an S. Instead of using the standard normal distribution, we must use a t-distribution with degrees of freedom. The interval is on page 371. It has a margin of error E. Instead of having a z alpha over 2, it has a t alpha over 2. And instead of having a sigma, it has an S. And this represents your confidence interval for the mean when sigma is not known. Sometimes students get confused as to whether it's a z or a t distribution. There's a flow chart that's very helpful on page 375, and it's continued on page 376 in a table that you can also read, and it helps you determine if you're using a normal distribution or a t distribution. The next part we're going to look at is the confidence intervals for the variance and your standard deviation. These confidence intervals use a chi-square distribution. The reason is your standard deviation and your variance are squares, so we don't use a normal, we use a chi-squared. And the chi-square distribution is just a normal distribution that has been squared. So instead of starting at negative infinity, it starts at 0. On the chi-square distribution, you'll have a left and a right. The confidence intervals for the mean and standard deviation sigma are on page 387. You'll have to find your chi-squared left and right, use your n, and the appropriate formulas listed below. Also, if you need to find the n, the sample size, for a confidence interval with a standard deviation or a variance, you'll want to use the formulas of the table listed on page 390. It lists out whether you want standard deviation sigma or variance sigma squared. You find your degree of freedom alpha, or not degree of freedom, degree of confidence alpha, and it gives you the appropriate sample size. So you don't use a formula, you use a table. And again, that table is on page 390. That concludes this lesson over 7.4 through 7.5.